Emerging from the tranquility of an Arctic winter den, polar bear cubs journey into spring. Their playground, off the coast of Siberia on the Soviet Union's Wrangel Island, was magnificently captured during its springtime transition by Soviet cinematographer Yuri Ledin. This unique Soviet program on one of its wildlife preserves is shared with Americans for the first time in the land of the polar bears, next time on Nova. Most Nova programs are available on videocassette. Schools, businesses, and organizations interested in purchasing videocassettes should call 1-800-441-NOVA.
Local presentation of this program is made possible by a grant from Cincinnati Microwave, makers of the Passport radar receiver. Passport, pocket-sized radar protection.
And by the Cincinnati Business Courier. America's great business stories begin in your own hometown. The Courier is your source for local business news. And by the Cincinnati Computer Store, an authorized Apple dealer, located in Tri-County in the Princeton Plaza, serving the tri-state for over 11 years. WCET thanks Directors Club member Mr. George Houck, Jr. for his contribution to the station's general operating fund. Such community support is essential to the continued future programming of WCET.
People have feared the shark for thousands of years. Because of that, these animals have been hunted mercilessly. But this misunderstood predator is more victim than threat. Peter Benchley explodes the myths surrounding sharks. The next National Audubon Society special.
On WCET, Sunday night at 8.
Saddle up for Riders in the Sky, presented by WVXU at the Emory Theater September 1st. Don't miss Too Slim, Ranger Doug, and Fiddler Woody Paul in a night of highfalutin music and zany comedy. Riders in the Sky, September 1st, one show only, 8 p.m. at the Emory Theater. Tickets are available at all Ticketron outlets and at WVXU, 745-3738.
Ooh, watch it fly, here comes the Santa Fe.
America's first licensed public television station.
You see me here alone in the studio. Why? Well, notice no pledge set. Nobody's setting up phones, not even a tote board in sight. That's because WCET is having another phone-free campaign this August and trusting you to make it work. It has for the past 3 years, so please let's do it again. Here's how. Keep the trust. Rush your check to WCET, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45214. Memberships begin at $30, or try our $5 a month installment plan.
America's first licensed public television station, WCET, TV 48, Cincinnati.
Major funding for the struggle for democracy has been provided by Intel Corporation, manufacturer of the 386 microprocessor, setting a standard for desktop computing worldwide. Additional funding has been provided by public television viewers.
This is a traditional Hindu wedding, but it's being celebrated in Toronto. These Brahmin families are reaffirming here in Canada ancient Indian traditions about the role and rights and duties of man and woman.
The bride's father has come from India with a substantial gift of money to the groom, a symbolic dowry. Although formal dowry payments are illegal in both countries, in India they are still a matter of life and death.
But this episode of the struggle for democracy is not about bride and groom. It's about another complex role called citizen.
Deepak, the groom, is a Canadian citizen. Renu, the bride, is an Indian citizen. Here she takes a step towards becoming a Canadian. And what intrigues me is that her rights and responsibilities as a citizen and as a woman will, by this simple step, become radically different from what she left behind. There are 750 million people in what India's rulers like to call the world's largest democracy. I went to the banks of the Ganges to meet a people for whom the idea of democracy is new. They've had the institutions of democracy for just over 40 years, and the technology and systems that go with it. But that's not very long, measured against centuries of royal rule and separation by caste and religion. The legacy of those princely rulers is still evident in architecture and ritual. And I soon found it in the attitude of the people, too. I met the Maharani of Jaipur, one of a small number of extraordinary women who have managed to rise to prominence in India. She did it by royal birth. I wanted to know if the education of a princess had taught her anything about her responsibilities to her people.
In a way, sort of behavior, I suppose, and one was taught to be courteous to one's elders, and that it was one's role to look after people who were less fortunate than oneself, and one was kind to one's dependents and tried to help as much as possible.
It had been convenient and useful for the British to keep the Maharajas and the Maharanis in power. But in 1947, the long struggle for independence ended, and so did the rule of those princes.
My mother used to tell us that with the independence, the states would have to go, and that it was a sacrifice that the princes would have to make for making a united India.
How did you feel about that?
One felt that one would be doing something for one's people, and I think most princes felt that they still have a role to play, and indeed they could have done if they had wanted to do so.
This is Movietone. At midnight, the actual transfer of power took place. The ceremony was addressed by the President, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, and the Prime Minister, Pandit Nehru.
The new constitution said that these people were now citizens endowed by law with the power to choose their own rulers. Soon they would be flocking to the polls among the world's most enthusiastic ballot casters. And in 1962, when the Maharani of Jaipur decided to present herself as a candidate, the affection the people still had for their former princess swept her into parliament with the biggest majority ever won in a democratic election. I think that huge vote was her people saying, "This may be a democracy now, but you're still our Maharani." And I went to the streets of Jaipur with her to see if they still felt that way.
I'd be interested to hear what these people think about whether democracy works in this country.
आप देखिए मेरे ऊपर मत आना। आप पूछ रहे हैं, साहब लोग ये पूछ रहे हैं कि आप क्या सोचते हैं कि इस देश में प्रजातंत्र काम देते हैं या नहीं, प्रजातंत्र है या नहीं इस देश में?
सभी आते हैं जो सभी ऐसे ही कहते हैं काम।
He believes
कोई पार्टी आए वो सभी सभी देती है काम करने की।
He says that he believes that there's democracy in our country and that if any party comes, then their representatives try to...
There is no democracy.
Why is there no
India
democracy?
dictatorship is one family's dictatorship is in India. महारानी साहब हमारे यहाँ से MP थे तो हमारे को कोई परेशानी नहीं होती.
When I was the MP, they had no problem.
This is parliament.
Can I ask them why?
Yes.
ध्यान रखते थे.
Because they took an interest in the people and their welfare. That's the answer. Human beings are terribly difficult to deal with, and well, in our kind of a society, and I think it's true of the West as well, are very self-motivated and don't think so much for the community. Now just look at the streets, look at Jaipur. It was once a very, very clean city. But the sweepers go on strike, they're not happy, so they go on strike, and then people don't care where they park their cars, and for every little thing there's litigation.
What's the solution? What is the way out for your country?
I don't know. I mean, I don't believe in dictatorship. But on the other hand, there's no sense of discipline left in the citizens of India.
Saying, I don't believe in dictatorship, but means that the Maharani has not yet accepted messiness and conflict as a normal cost of liberty. And I came to feel that if she still retained some of those old attitudes, so might most of those people she's scolding for lack of discipline.
Most of these people have the vote, and most of them use it in numbers that should be embarrassing to a lot of us in the Western democracies. But one trouble is that voting is almost the only thing they do politically. I don't get the impression many of them do constituency work or even get involved in pressure groups, consumer groups, producer groups, civil liberties groups. All of those kinds of voluntary associations that put so much muscle into the best of the Western democracies. And so you get a group of elected elites ruling and serving a population of clients. It's like Western medicine with a group of professional elites serving and treating a population of patients who have nothing to say about the process except to select the doctor. And that's not good medicine, and I don't think it's good politics.
We live in a feudal society. This country has been ruled by the kings. That is why in our newspapers you will find VVIP, very, very important person. Now, in a socialist democracy, what is the scope of saying somebody's very, very important persons, somebody's very important persons, somebody's IP, important person, not police officer, and somebody's only P, a person? I mean, what is the scope for that? I do not know, but it is there.
So it's not just the government that has this feudal attitude, it's the people too?
Yes, that is the thing. The democracy definitely is there in a certain way that we have a right to vote every 5 years. But thereafter, nothing is being done, absolutely nothing. They do not know that they had so much power. I feel these poor people, when they'll wake up to their rights and their power, there will be a sea change in this country. But I hope when it comes, I'm still alive. And secondly, if I'm not alive, it does not come violently.
Some change was in fact set in motion by the old aristocracy. The Maharani of Jaipur founded this girls' school to help bring Indian women out from behind purdah, the traditional veil of oppression and exclusion.
Because it's helped so many girls who were very conservative and restricted families to get out into the world, and one of our ex-pupils is even the Indian ambassador in Peru. And so they're all around the globe, and I meet them and I feel very happy about it. At the same time, we try to make the children happy. Awaj mat karna, awaj nahi. And then we try to make them self-sufficient, and at the same time, we've kept up dancing.
If these girls marry, their fathers may still discreetly pay the now illegal dowry. But because they're privileged girls, they will almost certainly escape one price of the dowry tradition that still tragically affects hundreds of Indian families.
The citizens' rights of Indian women are still fragile. Ironically, at the very moment that they leave childhood behind and marry, the old tradition of the dowry still marks them in the eyes of society as property. And property that is not satisfactory can be destroyed. In 1981, Ram Gopal arranged a marriage for his daughter Babindra, but he was not prepared for the additional dowry demands that the new husband's family made, supposedly because of Babindra's ill temper and bad housekeeping.
पुलिस ने टेलीफोन किया कोई दिन के 12 बजे कि तुम्हारी लड़की जल के मर गई है और आप फटाफट आ जाओ। मैं कार लेके दौड़ा उधर, तो मैंने क्या देखा कि ग्राउंड फ्लोर उनका मकान बना हुआ है, ऊपर चढ़ने के लिए कोई जीना नहीं है, तो ऊपर छत के ऊपर मेरी लड़की को मुंडेर के सारे लिटा करके और जला के उन्होंने मार रखा। तो मैंने वहीं चिल्लाना शुरू किया कि मेरी लड़की की इन्होंने हत्या कर दी है और मैं बड़ा ही।
Ram Gopal can only mourn his daughter now. He tried to get his son-in-law prosecuted, but the courts were reluctant. Although he had eyewitness evidence, although a woman, a citizen of India, had been murdered because she had not brought enough money into the marriage, official India scarcely recognized the dead woman as a person, and the judge declared the case not worth proceeding with. Mrs. Subidri Battalia once saw a neighbor die in flames, another dowry victim. Outraged, she decided that she would get involved.
In 1975, which was the International Women's Year, 350 women were burned to death in Delhi only over the dowry issue. Almost every day the newspapers reported the death of a woman, but it was always treated as an accident, you know. Even when the parents said that it was not an accident, nobody seemed to attach any importance to that. So then we held a very big demonstration on the 1st of June 1979, and that was the beginning of this anti-dowry movement, a real militant movement which believes in demonstrations and protests actually started with our demonstration.
These women are doing their best to use a democratic constitution to accelerate the processes of justice. They have a long road, and many of their sisters are not yet walking with them on that road. Democracy, the rule of the people, has up to now mostly meant the rule of men. It's been for women a kind of invisibility, and it's not unique to India. I went to a different Western culture, where centuries ago, the men came up with their own version of democracy. These mountains of Switzerland have developed a people who are hardy and self-reliant, and in the face of avalanches and storms, the people have built a powerful tradition of mutual help and cooperation. And the men have always borne arms over the centuries. In the winter, the cows safely in the barn, many of them would go down into Europe to fight as mercenaries for the princes and the dukes, or for the Pope or the King of Denmark, and then come back home in the spring with their pockets jingling. Highly trained fighting men. Max Roth, restaurateur, is a modern Swiss soldier, not fighting for other European countries, but defending the homeland. Every year, he takes his automatic rifle out of the nursery closet and checks it over before leaving for his compulsory annual 3 weeks maneuvers. It's the only place I know of where almost every able-bodied man in the country keeps an Army-issue gun and ammunition in the house. Switzerland's conscript army has kept the country neutral, armed, and peaceful through 2 world wars that thundered all around it.
pretty well impregnable to anything but a nuclear attack.
I was about 18 years old. I was in a small village, Kurwalden, way up high in the Swiss Alps, studying at a small international college there. We were at school one day in class. All of a sudden, the whole building was surrounded by soldiers in helmets, guns. It looked like World War II. It's broken out again. And what I found out was that these weren't professional soldiers. These were just regular citizens, guys from Zurich and Basel, accountants, professors, butchers, just everyday Swiss, and that for them to be a citizen meant to be a soldier.
Well, that was 30 years ago, and now you're the director of the first ever American Institute committed to the study of the culture and politics of democracy. And I gather that there's a direct line connecting those two events.
Well, there sure is a direct line. I mean, the Swiss took being a soldier as the foundation of what it meant to be a citizen. And that went all the way back to that guy, William Tell, who school kids still read about today, the famous Bowman, who with his neighbors created an independent Switzerland out of 3 little cantons in the old Urschweiz against the Habsburgs in Austria, and created a democracy made up of citizen soldiers.
Franz Graf is a farmer in Appenzell, on the border with Austria and Liechtenstein. Every spring, he puts on his sword, a symbol of the soldierly basis of his liberty, and trudges into town to play his part in the government of the canton. Appenzell is one of only 5 of the 23 Swiss cantons or states that still have an annual open-air local parliament, or Landsgemeinde. Here is where the cantonal decisions are voted on, but not by elected representatives. The citizens are the government here. This man calls for the construction of a new railway crossing. Another opposes it, pointing out that the first man is in the construction business.
More than 500 years ago, the people of Appenzell swore an oath here that in the future, the few would obey the decisions of the many, and all law would be made and voted upon openly, and they're still doing it. And every member has the right to stand up here and be heard. But there's a problem here. There are no women in this Landsgemeinde. The Swiss democracy was created by citizen soldiers, and soldiers were men. So democracy was for men, and women did not get to vote nationally in this democracy until 1971. Lillian Uchtenhagen, political scientist and member of parliament, told me how difficult it was.
Oh, I always resented when I was a very young girl that I didn't have exactly the same what my brother had. And I started to read booklets, you know, when I was 14, I think. And my first speech I had with 16 in front of a party congress of the Liberal Party. And the men were very, they had tears, but they still said no. And then I entered the suffragette society, if you want, and I went from canton to canton, from community to community, and talked about it.
What did people say to you when you made your speeches?
At the beginning, it was very hard, you know. They laughed, but it's not so easy to laugh at me.
A woman in Appenzell said to us, we really run the house, let the men have their Landsgemeinde if they want to. We have the power. Is that true, or is she just saying that as a kind of self-defense?
It's partly true, I think, for many women, you know, and maybe even I would take the same point of view if I would live in Appenzell. I mean, you can't go on, kill yourself for dozens and dozens of years. So we have a lot of women who fight for it in Appenzell, but it's just a small country, it's an old custom. So in the end, I would also say just let them have it, you know. And it's, of course, it's practically a rule that if men are
giving us little right, we get it out somewhere else.
A couple of thousand miles northwest of Switzerland, this island nation has no soldiers of any kind. And yet it has become one of the most fascinating battlegrounds in women's fight for democratic citizenship.
A blustery, chill Saturday in the south of Iceland, alternately splashed with sunshine and lashed with rain. And the president of this country has given up part of the weekend to drive into the interior and be with some of the country people. So why is the president of Iceland down on her knees planting trees? What is this all about?
Well, this is very important for we have to make the country greener than it is, actually. And we are planning reforestation. We know that wood was growing here in the Middle Ages, and we believe in this country. We believe that we can make it greener, and that is of eminent importance.
Vigdis Finnboga's daughter is very much a citizen president, a head of state who's out among her people. So few that they're more like a family than a nation, where it would seem that making democracy work shouldn't be difficult at all.
I think democracy in this country is very strong. We are so few, these 240,000 souls that live here, that every single person is very, very important. And we are listened to. It's very important that every single person takes a standpoint. And I believe that's why so many Icelanders return back home when they have studied abroad. We always come back home. We very much travel in the world, but we always come back home because we feel that we are needed in this country.
The world's oldest parliament is assembling for debate in Reykjavik. It's called the Alþingi. It first met as far back as 930 AD.
Þessi ríkisstjórn hefur verið að bauka við það undanfarna mánuði.
Until this politician and the party she represents came into the Alþingi, it was almost exclusively a parliament of men. But in the last quarter of the 20th century, a group of women began to change all that.
We have a long history of women liberation movements in this country. 100 years ago, it all started. And we wouldn't be where we are today unless we had this history and we had the struggle of our mothers and our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers. And in recent years, there have been a few notable events in that history of struggle for women's rights in Iceland. The 24th of October 1975, when all Icelandic women went on strike and became internationally known. We were saying, look, we stop society if we stop working. So now it's time, you have to start to listen to our demands.
This was the first time in modern history that women acting together had brought a nation to a dead halt. Soon there would be more firsts. In 1980, the Icelanders elected the first woman ever to take possession here in the mansion of the president. Only a figurehead, not an executive, but a vital national symbol.
For a long time, I didn't see whether I could be a candidate or not, but at the end, because they trusted me, I thought it was a challenge. And,
But who was the they?
they were different people in the country, intellectuals, artists, but first and foremost, the seamen and the farmers. The seamen have such confidence in women because they are away all the time, and they know that the woman does not only run the house while they're away, they take care of the banks and everything. I'm a single woman, and of course that was breaking the tradition because everybody always sees a couple in the presidency. So they asked me, how on earth are you going to do this without a husband? And an old man, old farmer, jumped up and said, I'm so happy that you are not married, my dear Vigdis, because if you were married, whenever you opened your mouth, everybody would say that her husband told her to say, or something like that.
But the real transformation came here, when for the first time anywhere, an all-woman's party got into Parliament. And soon Sigurdur Kristmundsdottir was a member here of a party with a strikingly new attitude towards power.
We don't have a leader, and we work in groups. Each group is given a certain, well, things have to be decided upon and things have to be worked out, and each group has a special area to work on. And when decisions have to be made, they are made by consensus.
Is that a problem for you in terms of just the time it takes to hammer out consensus on everything?
Yes, time is often very valuable.
How do you feel about that? Do you often say maybe we should have a chairman or a
No,
president or
no,
an executive
no,
officer?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. I think democracy, in my view, takes time. And I think the benefits are so high, the voice of every woman counts, and counts equally. And even though it costs time, and even though sometimes we have to cope with a little chaos because of it, it's worth it, in my opinion.
Do you feel that you represent only women?
No, the majority I represent are women. I know that. And I do, being a feminist, I know I do represent a women's point of view. But I also know I represent quite a few men and very many children.
Watching their annual celebrations, I thought, these people really like each other. They all speak the same language. There's no conflict with minorities. There's a great tradition of unity and national pride and participation and hard work. They don't even have an army. And unlike India and Switzerland, the women play a major part. It seems as though democracy's really working.
On this national day, in this country that has such a long tradition of democracy, I'd be interested to know what you think of the state of democracy in Iceland right now.
Well, that's a very complicated issue which deserves a very thorough answer. I don't think it is very good. We have whatever government has majority in parliament can in fact do whatever it wants to do within the limits of the parliament. It doesn't have to heed the voices that are in opposition in any way.
2 years went by, and then there was a conference here in Canada on women and power, where I had another chance to talk to Sigurdur Kristmundsdottir.
When we parted in Reykjavik a couple of years ago, you said you thought the status of democracy in Iceland was not too good. Has anything changed since then?
For the Women's Alliance, things have changed. In the spring of 1987, we had general elections, and we doubled our vote and got 6 members into the 63-member parliament. Now the polls are showing us having around 20% of the vote.
What did you have 2 years ago?
2 years ago, we had around 9%.
So you more than doubled.
We more than doubled, yes. And that means that we are being listened to more carefully. And surely we know in the Women's Alliance that participation in government is right around the corner.
In fact, they were invited to participate in a coalition government. But the other parties rejected their conditions and demands. So they withdrew. They weren't strong enough yet, they said. They would wait until they had more elected members. There was still a lot of work to do.
And some of that work entailed traveling to other countries, getting the word out to other women. And in 1988, they turned up in my country.
And among the women they met was somebody who had played an extraordinarily important role in the women's struggle here, half a decade ago.
This is Sigurdur Kristmundsdottir, Mary Lou McPhedran.
Pleased to meet you.
Mary Lou McPhedran is a lawyer who was awarded Canada's highest civilian honor for her contribution to the empowerment of women.
So how do you exercise your power now?
We are part of the opposition, and we are able to proclaim our views and put forward our proposals in Parliament and generally speak about how we want society to be.
And how much is changing? Are the bills that you're supporting being passed?
No, not a single vote.
McPhedran had had her own disheartening encounters with the old male-dominated political parties. About the same time that Iceland's women had started their all-women's party, Canadian women got organized to take a hand in the writing of the most important political document a country can have, its constitution. In April 1982, Queen Elizabeth II, who strangely enough is still the Queen of Canada, came to sign Canada's first homegrown constitution, the constitution that finally and clearly spelled out the fundamental rights and freedoms of all Canadian citizens. It had taken decades of squabbling before Canada's diverse provinces could agree on this document. And this is the story of what happened in the 2 years before this signing, when Canadian women began to fear that the Constitution would not guarantee them equal rights with men. They had reason to worry. Canadian women didn't get to vote in national elections until 1917. And 12 years later, they still weren't considered persons under Canadian law. They had to go to Britain to get that one fixed. Although Canada was politically independent, psychologically we were still a British colony. But geographically, that's where our essential character lay. Canada's huge landscape changes radically as you wing across it, and so do its peoples. Different voices, different faces, different tongues, grouped into different political units, the 10 provinces. Provinces that for 115 years never could agree on a national constitution for this land. And that's why the national government finally tried to solve the constitutional problem by itself. In 1981, it convened a special parliamentary committee in this room in Ottawa to hear specifically from Canadian interest groups what they wanted to see in the new Charter of Rights that was going to accompany the Constitution. And the women who appeared in front of that committee were feeling pretty good about the reasonable reception they were getting. And then came the closing remarks from the chairman.
We want to thank the National Action Committee on the Status of Women for being present today. We appreciate you coming. As a matter of fact, we're honored. However, your time is up, and I was just wondering why we don't have a section in here for babies and children. All you girls are going to be working, and we're not going to have anybody to look after them.
You would have been better off as a chairman if they just used your gavel.
So when Senator Hayes said this, how did you feel?
I was stunned. I wasn't sure that I'd heard him correctly because it was so extreme and so honest. And I listened to the reaction to the question, and it became clear to me that that was what he had said. And when I saw the way in which the decision makers around that huge table reacted, most of them very comfortable with what he had said, I realized that unless we took a very active role in this, and if we left it in their hands, they would dismiss it totally because that was what they believed.
What they were most afraid of was that the men who run this country wouldn't seriously listen to their demand for an explicit guarantee of equality rights in the Charter. But what they did count on was ironically a man, a cabinet minister, Lloyd Axworthy, minister responsible for the status of women. Axworthy was a minister in a government that argued there was no need to have an equality clause specifically written down. There were enough other clauses to deal with that. But when women sought legal advice, they were told that the draft had so many loopholes regarding equality that you could drive a Mack truck through it. So after a day-long intensive work session with lawyers on the Charter, a group of 300 women asked their minister to come and talk to them at a dinner meeting.
We were expecting him to give us a speech that let us know that he wanted to know what had happened that day and that he would advocate with us and for us and take our concerns forward. And what we got was a great leap of faith speech instead.
was an incredible thing to see. I was at the back of the room. Linda, as one of the organizers, was closer to the front. So Axworthy was at the front on the podium. And one of the things that had struck me going to this dinner was how many gray heads of hair there were in the room. And I watched these women, and I saw them, they started to pound on the table.
What were they pounding at? I still don't know
They
what
were
he said.
pounding in reaction to Axworthy because he dismissed it, and he said, trust me, I'm the minister responsible for status of women. I'm in Ottawa, I know what's going on, and I'll take care of it. Don't bother me with these details. You don't understand. And he literally said, you don't understand.
And with that, Sheila Wilkinson stood up, pounded on the table,
Gray
and
hair.
said, you're our minister responsible. Be responsible.
And he?
He backtracked, mumbled, and
He
shuffled out of the room.
He looked
shortly
really
after.
put out. He was furious that we would treat him so badly. There was no responsibility on his part for the way he dismissed that entire, we're talking 300 women.
A few weeks later, the then president of the Advisory Council on the Status of Women accused this same minister of political interference. She declared that he was trying to stop the council from holding a national conference on the charter.
I thought it over afterwards and decided that there wasn't anything for me to do but resign. But I thought, I'm not going to go out quietly. I'm going to issue a press release about why I'm resigning.
You can imagine my surprise when I heard that Miss Anderson had held a press conference accusing me of political interference. And
Well, why do you think she did that?
I don't know, Patrick. I just don't know. But I can tell you without any equivocation that when I met with the Advisory Council executive on a January morning, the furthest thing from my mind was that I was going to stop a conference or that we were kind of concerned about what they were doing. It was just not a matter that I'd spent any time thinking about.
Women all across the country had been, because of the media, had been following this with incredible interest. And a lot of women who'd never paid the slightest attention before to the women's movement or to the constitutional issue suddenly got very angry.
And at that point, I called a couple of women who were as angry as I was and said, let's have lunch tomorrow and deal with this. We were so angry, it was hard for us to figure out even what we would do.
And I read in the Globe and Mail, the national newspaper, while I was in Ottawa, that these women were angry and they'd said, okay, we'll have the conference. We have no money, we have no organization, we have no time, we don't know how it's going to happen, but we're going to have it. And I thought, what guts? That's fantastic. I picked up the phone, I called Toronto, they said, call so-and-so in Ottawa. I went to a meeting that night. They said, okay, you're a lawyer, fine. You organize the legal panel. We don't know who you need. Just find out who it is, get them there. And in 3 weeks, we had over 1,400 women from across the country. We had black women, we had Indian women, we had older women,
had Tories,
younger women.
We had liberals, we had NDPers.
We even had some men who came, a couple of MPs, members of parliament, who stood there. I remember one of them saying to me, I've never seen anything like this in my life. This whole conference has been run by a team. The entire chairing has been done by a troika. There are 3 women. There is no leader here. And I said, well, that's because you're a man and women do things in a different way.
I think the proof of the pudding is that in fact, we had to come here to discover just exactly what we thought and put it forth because nobody else is putting it forth.
This was a real grassroots conference. Women from across the social spectrum who couldn't afford to take time out from their lives, but did anyway.
While the conference strongly endorsed stricter guarantees for women in the Charter, the most enthusiastic outpouring of feeling was saved for this woman, Doris Anderson, whose resignation as head of the Status of Women Council, after claiming political interference by the minister responsible, Lloyd Axworthy, sparked women to organize this conference.
The next time a cabinet minister of the government tries to tell women to go home and shut up, they'll think twice about it.
I remember walking out and saying, I'm going to go home now. And this young woman who was one of the assistants on the Hill.
You thought your work was done?
Yeah. I mean, I was tired and it had been great and everything, but I wanted to go home and spend some time with my dog and the man that I lived with and, have a little bit of a personal life. And this young woman who was an executive assistant turned to me and said, you can't go home. She said, if you aren't on the Hill tomorrow morning, in the House leaders' offices, capitalizing on the publicity of this weekend, you will have let down generations of Canadian women.
So they didn't go home. They stalked these corridors, corralling MPs and getting through all kinds of closed doors because officials took them for secretaries. And they were helped by a subversive group of real secretaries and executive assistants and MPs, women who had access to telephones and photocopiers, and who knew the ropes, and helped turn this group of citizens into a lobby, finding out firsthand what you got to do to get action from your elected officials.
It was only when they became convinced that they were going to be held politically accountable, i.e. votes. That's the only point at which these people were seriously interested in hearing what we had to say and to do something about it. And that's the point at which we ended up sitting around a table with the top lawyers for the government, negotiating the kind of equal rights amendment that we felt was necessary.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? All those in favor, please say yea. All those opposed, please say nay. In my opinion, the yeas have it. All those who are in favor of the amendment, please rise.
Mr. Broadbent, Mr. Broadbent.
What they achieved in 2 short months between February and April was phenomenal. They not only put on the agenda a guarantee of sexual equality, Clause 28, but they lobbied these members so well that Parliament passed that clause unanimously on April the 23rd, 1981.
But this country of mine, well, it's not always easy for a national government just to do what it wants to do. We're a confederation of 10 autonomous provinces with 10 powerful premiers who have ideas of their own. And this time, this court, the Supreme Court of Canada, decided that the national government was morally and traditionally obliged to come to a deal with the premiers about the Constitution. The National Minister of Justice suddenly realized that he might not get a Constitution at all if he insisted on telling those 10 premiers what they had to do about human rights.
You know, after the decision of the Supreme Court of Canada on the Constitution, we decided to have another try to get the agreement with the province, and we met in November 1981. And it came quite clear that in order to have some provinces on side, we had to drop the question of the equality of men and women in the Constitution and the native rights.
In fact, they didn't drop it, but they did give the provinces the right to override it. And when the opposition heard about this override clause, they asked if that meant that provinces could now set aside those hard-won equal rights.
Would the Prime Minister confirm that in the original accord signed by himself and the 9 premiers on Thursday, the opt-out or override provisions do not apply to the guarantee of equality of male and female persons?
Well, Madam Speaker, I think this is the question asked from the young lady from the NDP the other day. I had a chance to look up since then, as I said I would. Well, if one can say honorable gentleman, is it prohibited to say honorable lady? Would you like me to call her something else? The government of Canada didn't want to take anything out of the resolution which is before the House. Nothing. We wish the leader of the opposition had supported it when it was there.
So we said, okay, if we drop it momentarily in order to get an agreement, that won't last very long. I remember that I said, wait a minute until, you know, the woman and the natives goes after the scalp of these premiers, and they will come back pretty quickly.
However, the premier of the province of Newfoundland and all the other premiers had their own special agendas, while the women of Newfoundland, like women all across the country, had only one, that equal rights clause, Clause 28.
Clause 28 will stand on guard for me.
I remember walking across the campus, whatever university it was, in the pouring rain, thinking, they don't think I'm a person. I'm not a person. What are they doing?
We were being lied to, and it took a while to realize that, but we weren't. We were told that we weren't left out of the Constitution, but everybody was ignoring the override clause, which said that any province at any time could ignore the basic equality provisions whenever that province wished to.
So we decided that what we would do is that we would have a demonstration, and different ideas were tossed around. That some people wanted to mourn the loss of women's rights. That in fact, what we would do is that we would have a vigil, and that we would have candles, and we would have wreaths to show that in fact what had happened was that it was the end of women's rights in Canada.
So a determined group of Newfoundland women gathered in the provincial legislature building, demanding to see the premier, Brian Peckford.
We sent word that we were here and we were waiting for Brian Peckford to come down and see us. And we were told, in fact, that he wasn't going to come and see us. And we thought, well, that's fine. We've got time. We'll wait. Finally, Brian Peckford came down. I thought that he thought, well, just be patient. You know, I'm going to take care of this for you. I'm going to, you know, everything's going to be okay, and just trust me. And, but we knew exactly what we wanted.
I can't give you an entrenched guarantee because I'm only one of the 10. If I could give you the entrenched guarantee, sacred so that it could never be changed, I'd give it to you. I don't have the power to do that. That's the power of 9 provinces and the federal government to entrench it.
And we said, well, that you can do it, and that we also want you to lobby the other premiers to withdraw their support from the Accord. Then he had said something to the effect of, well, you know, I didn't realize, in fact, that what would happen, that this wasn't our fault, that we didn't realize that the ramifications of Clause 33, that they would, in fact, be, that it would affect Clause 28. And so I said to him, I said, Mr. Peckford, do you mean to tell me that you signed the Accord without knowing what you were signing? And then he got really angry, and he said, well, no, that's not what I mean. And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, you know, we just didn't realize. And I said, well, Mr. Peckford, I'm really confused then. And basically then, at that point, dialogue was over.
This is the Parliament Hill office of New Democrat Margaret Mitchell, and it's also been one of the strategy centers for the women's lobby for the equality guarantee in the Constitution. Groups like this here in Ottawa and in cities across the country have been working to put pressure on the politicians.
The Premier of Newfoundland capitulated. One by one they were coming in, and when there was only one left, the Premier of Saskatchewan, the Parliament of Canada agreed unanimously to put pressure on him. It didn't work.
I must revert to the position I took, that my priority was Indian and Aboriginal rights, or treaty and Aboriginal rights. And I cannot, simply because someone is pressuring for that women or whoever are able to mount a better lobby than Indian and Métis Native people are, that we ought to respond to one and not to the other.
And we felt, okay, this is it. If we have to be in Regina, we have to be in Regina. We have no choice. And Wendy Williams was there as well. And Wendy took out her checkbook and she says, here's $100. And we knew within a period of a few hours, we had collected $1,200 to send someone to Regina. And I went to Regina as a spokesperson for the group. Everybody was focused in now on Regina and on Blakeney. I wouldn't have wanted to be the man for the world. And we had a demonstration in Regina, and it was that night, and it was 40 below zero, and it was outside their House of Assembly. The house was locked up. The women had asked if the doors would be open, and they were refused. So we decided that we would have it outside anyways, even though it was 40 below. And the first woman to speak at the demonstration was a Native woman, and she got up and she said, "I'm a woman, and I'm French, and I'm Indian, and according to this charter, I have no rights at all as a Canadian citizen."
As far as our rights are concerned, we are worse off than we ever have been before. Our rights have always been vulnerable. We have always been second-class citizens.
You could really feel the swell in the crowd in terms of the fact also that women from across the country had come to lobby and to join the women in Saskatchewan. We could really feel that women from all over the country were represented, and we felt so empowered. And we really pressured Blakeney.
Problem one, our lawyers tell us that the statement of legal equality of men and women in Section 28 could endanger laws which give women special benefits, affirmative action program.
But just a few days later, Blakeney turned too and got the native rights guarantee he'd been holding out for.
I'm pleased to be able to inform this House that I have obtained from all provinces who are party to the accord or agreement that Section 28 on the equality of men and women should apply without the override clause. In addition, I am happy to report to the House that all provinces have agreed to enshrine Aboriginal rights in the Canadian Constitution.
In order to achieve an absolutely crucial element of the advance of social justice in this country, you had to depend on the participation of a citizens group.
But I always believed I was the Minister of Indian Affairs. I was the first one who started to give money to the Indians to lobby against myself.
But would you say that if the women had not gotten organized around that issue, we wouldn't have had sexual equality in the Charter?
Yes, you need good spokesmen, and you get organized, and you raise hell. But, you know, the social agenda is so crowded today that if you're not able to get your voice heard, nobody will pay attention to you.
I don't think at any point in my life that I ever have been or wish to be again as exhausted mentally, physically, and emotionally. I probably went through greater highs of excitement and greater lows of pain. I don't think unless you work trying to get your government to be democratic and to work with you, especially when you go in with the expectation that you don't have to do much more besides show them what's wrong and get some response. I don't think unless you do that, you discover the kind of pain you feel when you really find out that you're invisible or that they've got other things on their mind or other priorities and that you have to work all sorts of things and put your jobs at risk, take money out of your pocket, put your families on hold.
But before long, those risks would arise again. Only 5 years after the signing of the Constitution, a new federal government and a new group of premiers met at a lodge at a place called Meech Lake and agreed to revise the Constitution, apparently putting the override power back into the hands of the provinces.
I mean, the consequences are that the Equal Rights Amendment is at risk. The whole concept of equality in our Constitution is at risk. And these guys who spend their time at resorts and in fancy hotels, meeting together where absolutely nobody has access to them, the 11 white, able-bodied men sitting around a table making decisions that impact on generations of disadvantaged people in this country and every citizen in this country, and they don't want to talk about it?
The whole process is sort of like doing dishes, you know, that they're never done. There's always another dirty dish, and it never stops. And we have to continue to be vigilant. And that's a line that we constantly use. The women of Canada are watching.
Major funding for this series was provided by Intel Corporation, creator of advanced microcomputer chips and systems. Our products bring the power of microcomputer technology to millions worldwide. Additional funding has been provided by public television viewers.
The companion book to the Struggle for Democracy series, written by Benjamin Barber and Patrick Watson and published by Little Brown and Company, is available in bookstores and libraries.
People have feared the shark for thousands of years. Because of that, these animals have been hunted mercilessly. But they may be an important link in the search for a cancer cure. They're the source of artificial skin for burn victims, and most of them are not man-eaters. Peter Benchley explodes the myths surrounding this misunderstood creature in Sharks, the next National Audubon Society special.
On WCET, Sunday night at 8.
I just love reading the comic strip Peanuts. My favorite story happens every fall. Without fail, there's Lucy conning poor, trusting Charlie Brown into believing that she's going to hold that football in place for him to kick. And then at the last possible moment, she pulls it away. It's pretty sad, isn't it, when you can't trust your friends? Well, thank goodness WCET has never had to worry about that. For 3 years, we've been able to avoid live August membership campaigns because of the support of members. And we're trusting you again to make that commitment to successfully continue phone-free August campaigns. You see, you trust us for the programs, and we trust you for the support. With your help, it'll work again. If you haven't had a chance to mail in your contribution yet, please do it right now. And I'm going to check out the far side. Keep the trust. Rush your check to WCET, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45214. Memberships begin at $30, or try our $5 a month installment plan.
They say laughter is the best medicine, so take this.
I heard your blood didn't circulate.
Not true. My blood circulates. I'm not saying everywhere, but it circulates.
Now you know why they call Neil Simon Doc.
The evolution of stand-up comedy? I think it's the absence of chairs.
He'll make you laugh and touch your heart. Neil Simon, not just for laughs, next time on American Masters.
On WCET, Monday night at 9. America's first licensed public television station, WCET, TV 48, Cincinnati. Portions of the following program contain adult subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised.
POV is a filmmaker term meaning point of view. Next on POV, a visit with Jack Levine, one of America's leading social realist painters.
Like Rubens, I love to paint flesh. Even though I am a satirist, I see no harm in having an attractive body in there.